Not too long ago, I was watching YouTube videos with my girlfriend. We were at my apartment just hanging out at night. I have an apartment that's not the greatest. It's on the first floor and I have a little patio that goes outside from the living room through a sliding glass door. Overall, it's fine though. So like I said, my girlfriend was over and we were just sitting on the couch watching TV. We watch YouTube or whatever all the time. It was probably like 9 p.m. or so. Suddenly, the screen went black for a moment, and then we were seeing some random phone screen. We were both very confused at first, but soon realized that someone must have connected their phone to my TV by mistake. There's a lot of apartment units close by, so you can connect to other people's devices if you really want to. We were seeing the phone screen of whoever this was going through their apps. I figured they would disconnect after realizing they were connected to my TV and not their own, and I expected the screen to return to what we were doing. In the meantime though, I was kind of interested to see what this person was doing, so I didn't bother to get up and turn off the TV or anything. The person then went into the Photos app on their phone. Then they started scrolling through them one at a time. It didn't take me long to see myself among these photos. There were pictures taken straight from my social media pages, such as Facebook and Instagram, just screenshots of them. And then there were pictures of my girlfriend as well. All kinds of pictures of both of us, from both my Facebook and her Facebook as well. And the more this went on, the more confused and creeped out we were. There were probably 10 photos of each of us, and this went on for several minutes. My girlfriend and I were talking to each other in disbelief, wondering who this was and what they were doing. Then, just like that, their phone disconnected. My TV returned to its home screen, and I was left wondering what on earth had just happened. But less than 5 minutes later, as my girlfriend and I were talking to each other trying to figure out what was going on, there was suddenly a knock at my apartment door. I rarely get anybody knocking on the door, so as soon as it happened we both stopped talking instantly. After a moment, I got up and walked over to see who was there. When I got there, I didn't see anybody. I was even more paranoid now. I figured whoever had connected to the TV had just knocked on my door. We were very confused, and eventually sat back down on the couch and tried to forget about it. We went on the YouTube app again and tried to play a video to take our mind off of things. Meanwhile, my sliding glass door in the room was mostly covered by blinds, but there was about 2 feet at the end that wasn't, as they weren't closed all the way. A few minutes into watching YouTube again, and I saw something out of the corner of my eye. You couldn't really see anything outside with some light being on in the apartment and it being dark out. But I did notice that someone was really close to the window in the opening of the blinds. I looked closer, and the person came closer. Then I realized that there was a man wearing a black ski mask with his face right on the other side of the glass, looking in. My girlfriend noticed him just after me and screamed. She got up and ran out of the room, as I stood up and backed away in shock. Then, very quickly, the masked man turned and ran off into the night. I went over and closed the blinds entirely. Then I made sure that every door and window was covered and locked and all that. I was very paranoid for the rest of the night, but nothing else happened, and since then, there have been no other occurrences like that. It could have just been an elaborate prank, but that was a little bit far to be taking things in my mind, and I also have no idea who would do that kind of a prank to us. My girlfriend and I still get a little bit worried that something like that might happen again when we're at my place at night, and we also have no clue who it was that could have done it. I'm just hoping that they don't return. This happened just last summer. I live by myself in what I would describe as a typical apartment. I have 1 bedroom, a bathroom, kitchen, and living room pretty much. It's inside of a building in a fairly large apartment complex. So one night, I worked sort of late into the night at my job. I was really tired from the long day, and pretty much just arrived home, took a quick shower, and went to bed. That was around midnight. However, I woke up at roughly 4 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, I wanted to get more sleep, but I was wide awake. I was also very thirsty and felt dehydrated. Sometimes, mostly in the summer, I wake up in the night because of dehydration, and obviously on this night I had worked late and not been able to drink as much. Then usually I drink some water and feel better immediately and then go right back to sleep. But some of the times when I wake up, I'm wide awake and can't go back to sleep right away, and this was one of those times. So what I usually do when that happens is get up and go into the living room and watch TV until I get sleepy again. That might be 15 or 30 minutes usually. So that was what I did on this night. I got out of bed, drank some water, immediately felt better, and then sat on the couch and turned on the TV. My couch is to the right of the front door to the apartment, about 20 feet away. I remember that when I sat down, I glanced over and happened to notice that my door was actually unlocked. I realized that I somehow had forgotten to lock it. Normally, I always remember, but I guess I forget sometimes. I went over and locked the door and then went back to the couch. I started watching TV and waited for myself to feel sleepy again. I was flipping around the channels for maybe 5 minutes when suddenly I heard a noise. Obviously, it was very quiet other than the noise from the TV, but the sound I heard was somebody trying to open the front door to my apartment. I really couldn't believe it, and I had no idea who it could be. I sat and listened, but didn't hear anything else. Then, after a moment, I got up and I walked over to the door. I looked out of the peephole, but nobody was there. Then I opened up my apartment door and looked into the hallway. That's when I saw him. There was a man wearing a hooded sweatshirt walking away from me down the hallway. He was mostly looking down at the ground, and then he went to another door and tried opening it, but this one was also locked. I watched him go to another door and try that one as well. Apparently, he hadn't noticed me opening the door. I didn't know who this guy was, but he was seemingly trying to get into any apartment. As he reached the end of the hallway, he suddenly looked behind him and then he saw me. When he did, I quickly closed the door. I was afraid that he would come back, but he didn't. Soon after, I went back to bed. I'm really glad that I woke up when I did that night and locked my door, or who knows what could have happened. This happened one summer afternoon in 2018 when my partner, my stepdad, and I decided to check out an abandoned factory near my parents' house. We were just picking up my partner when we passed by it, and without thinking much about it, we started talking about exploring the place. My stepdad, who tends to act on impulse like us, pulled over right by the building and we decided to go for it. It didn't take long to find a way inside. The factory was falling apart with broken windows, walls crumbling down, and most of the roof was missing. The only real obstacle was a doorway that had some debris in front of it. We cleared that away, and as soon as we stepped through the door, something felt off. It was the middle of the summer, but the air inside the building was freezing cold. I don't mean it was a little chilly, it felt like winter. It wasn't even a damp kind of cold, like what you would expect from an abandoned building. And anyway, there was enough holes in the walls and roof that it shouldn't have been that cold. The inside was just as trashed as the outside. Piles of broken machinery, rusted metal, and old wooden beams lay scattered around. As we moved farther into the building, my partner and stepdad went ahead to check out another room, and I wandered off by myself to look through some cabinets that had been left behind. It was like everything had just been abandoned overnight. Files, worker IDs, and even older sheets from the late 90s and early 2000s were scattered everywhere. Most of the orders were packed and ready to be shipped, but none of them had ever been sent out. My stepdad pointed out how strange that was, and the factory looked like it had been closed for many decades, even though the most recent date I found was 2002. The building at most had been abandoned for 16 years. I have no expertise in something such as how quickly buildings decay, but the whole place seemed very run down for only 16 years. As we were talking about how weird the place was, I started feeling something else. It wasn't just the cold or the dust or the abandoned vibe. I was getting a feeling of danger, like something was watching us, or maybe waiting for us to leave. I can't describe it any better than that. It was like my fight or flight response kicked in, but I didn't know why. I told my partner and stepdad, and they agreed that we should head out. It was odd, and we hadn't heard anything or seen anything strange, but we all felt it. We made our way back to the car, and just as we were pulling away from the building, my partner and I both noticed something. In the doorway we had just come through, standing there, was a figure. It was hard to make out clearly. It kind of looked human, but not exactly. Something about it didn't sit right. It was like a person, but not. The figure didn't move, as it just stood there, staring at us. My stepdad didn't seem to notice since he was too busy driving. My partner and I looked at each other at the same time and asked if we had seen that thing in the door, so it was definitely not our imagination. We never went back to the factory. I can't shake the feeling whenever I drive past the building to my partner's house. I drive past the abandoned factory so often, and I wish I had never gone inside, because I think about it every time I drive by. I have a horror story from Snapchat that happened just last year. I use Snapchat quite a bit and communicate with friends on there a lot. I post stories pretty frequently as well. I've had Snapchat for almost 10 years and over time have accumulated lots of friends on the app. When I post a story, sometimes friends will reply to them and say whatever. Now, starting last year, every time I posted a story, this one guy would seem to reply to it. I didn't really know who he was, but his name on Snapchat was Dave. I don't have any idea when exactly he added me or anything, but he would say things that were sort of creepy. Like one, for example, that stood out was when I posted a picture of my new apartment. The picture was just of like the living room and kitchen. He responded saying, "I wish I knew where you lived." It was almost like he was trying to be weird. I never bothered to delete him or anything because I didn't think it was too much of a problem. He never snapped me outside of responding to my stories, but eventually I got tired of it and deleted him. I didn't really think anything of it after doing so, but the next day, a new account added me on Snapchat. I didn't know that it was him making another account. I added him back out of curiosity because I had no idea who it was. Then, he sent me a snap asking why I deleted him. I then realized who it was and then deleted that account. Not too long after that, he tried to add me again with another one, but I did not add him back. He was using different usernames, but I knew that it was still him. The very next day, I got a text on my phone from a number that I did not recognize. It just said, "Hi," and I asked who it was. It took until like the third text for me to realize that it was the same guy. He started cursing me out, calling me terrible things, and was clearly very angry how I kept ignoring him. I blocked the number after he sent me about 20 texts in the span of 2 minutes. However, this couldn't stop him either. As most of you know, there are apps and websites where you can get new phone numbers for free. I've really never used one, but I know that they exist. I'm guessing that's what this guy was doing, because I got another text a while later. It was very clearly still him. I blocked this number too. Then, a while later, there was another new number. This time, though, he left a voicemail. I listened to it, and the man sounded much older than me. He basically called me every name in the book and then threatened me. I blocked his number. This continued for several days. I tried to ignore it as best as I could and just kept blocking his numbers. Soon, though, I decided to get a new phone. I sort of needed one anyways, and decided to get a new number as well. I also changed my Snapchat username. After that, I never heard from the guy again. Hopefully it stays that way. It was about a year ago when my parents and sister went out of state for a sports tournament, and I was left alone in the house for 3 days. I'd never been home by myself for that long, and I thought it would be nice to have some peace and quiet. The first night went by without anything out of the ordinary. I watched a couple of movies, made some popcorn, and went to bed around midnight. I didn't think much of it when I woke up in the middle of the night with an uneasy feeling. It was not anything specific, just a weird sense that someone was watching me. I shrugged it off and went back to sleep. The next day, everything seemed fine. I spent most of the time inside, just relaxing and watching more movies. By the evening, the feeling started to creep up again, like there was someone there, even though I was alone. I checked the house to make sure that all the doors and windows were locked, and everything looked normal. I even walked around the yard for a bit to see if anybody was outside, but I didn't find anything. By the time the third night rolled around, I was starting to get a little jumpy. I woke up again between 2 and 3 a.m. and I heard footsteps outside. It wasn't anything loud, just faint footsteps like somebody was walking on the gravel path outside. My heart started to race a bit, but I convinced myself it was probably just an animal, maybe a raccoon or something. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I couldn't fall asleep again, so I grabbed my shoes and flashlight, and I went outside to check things out and ease my mind. I walked around the house, shining the flashlight around, but there was nothing. I was starting to feel stupid about going outside alone in the middle of the night when I heard something from the woods behind the house. It was faint, but it sounded like a branch snapping, like something was walking through the trees. I don't know what made me do it, but I walked towards the sound. As I got about halfway from my house to the edge of the woods, I heard a loud, blood-curdling scream. I don't know if it was an animal or human, but it's a wild area behind my house, and it could have been a fox or a mountain lion. Either way, I freaked out, ran inside, and locked all the doors and windows. I peered through the curtains, trying to see if I could spot anything or anyone. I opened the curtains to a man standing close to the window, staring directly at me. As soon as he saw me, he turned and sprinted towards the woods. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, so I stayed up and watched more movies, and thankfully nothing else happened that night. When my parents came back the next day, I didn't tell them what happened. Since then, I've been home alone 5 more times, and I've never seen the man again. I don't know what he was doing and if the scream I heard was related to him or not, or just a coincidence from an animal, but it was a scary night. I live alone. This is something that happened just a few months ago. So my apartment is pretty standard for the most part. However, the front door opens right up to the outside, and there's a small grass area there. To the right of that is the parking lot. Then there are several levels of units. Mine is on the first level. I was at home one evening after I had gotten back from work. I was in the kitchen cooking, and right in the middle of that, my doorbell rang. I wasn't able to go over to the door right away, but I stopped what I was doing and then went over there. This was maybe 20 seconds after the bell had rang. When I got there though, I didn't see anybody. I looked out the window to as much as I could see, and there was nobody there. So at that point, I just went back to cooking. I didn't really know who it could be or why somebody would be ringing my doorbell. I figured that it was most likely someone at the wrong apartment though. Nothing else happened for a while. Several hours later, I was in my living room just hanging out. Then the doorbell rang again. I remembered from before and wondered if that person was back. Then the doorbell started ringing again and again, a bunch of times, really fast. I was so confused. I got up and started walking over to the door. In the time that I was going over there, the doorbell ringing stopped. Before opening the door though, I made it to the window and then looked outside. When I did, I was surprised to see that nobody was there again. They had been ringing my doorbell so many times in a row like they really wanted me to answer, and now they were just gone. I didn't know what to make of it. I looked around for several minutes but didn't see anyone. After that, I went back to what I was doing. I only stayed up for maybe another hour if that. Then I was tired and decided to go to bed. I started turning off the lights in my apartment, but before heading to my bedroom, I went over to the front door and looked out of the window one last time. However, this time I saw something. There was this tall and kind of thin man just standing there a few feet away from my door. He wasn't facing me, but kind of to the side. He didn't appear to really be doing anything though. The guy was wearing all black clothing, and I had no idea who he was. I thought that this was maybe the person who kept ringing my doorbell. It just seemed really suspicious though. I watched him for several minutes. The man just stood there and sort of looked around. Then he started walking away slowly. He went in the grass area out front, and then he walked across the quiet street that was there. After crossing, he walked right into the woods. There was no path or anything. He just went right in, and the woods there is very thick. I was so confused and also creeped out. Since then, I haven't had any more strange doorbell rings or anything. I also haven't seen the guy, and I'm still wondering who he is and what he was doing. I'm also wondering why he just went in the woods like that. Back in the day, I used to work at Sears. This is when they were doing really well and had tons of stores. If anybody doesn't remember Sears, they were a large department store that sold many things like appliances and clothes. It's mostly gone out of business in recent years though. But when I worked there, we would get lots of people in the store. Well, one time I was working a long day in December. With it being around Christmas time, there were lots of people shopping for gifts and stuff. It was also a weekend, so that added to it. I worked basically all day, and I saw countless people. When I was finally off of work, I was happy to go home and was tired. So I just remember that I clocked out of work and then left the store. I went out to my car and then drove back home. It took maybe 15 minutes or so to get back. Then I parked my car in the driveway and got out of it. However, as I was walking up to my front door, I heard a car coming down the street, which was usually very quiet. I noticed it but didn't really think that much of it at all, and I kept going. However, as I was opening my door to go inside, I happened to hear the car slowing down. I looked over to see that the car was starting to pull over to the side of the street in front of my house. So I stopped and I kept watching it because I wanted to see what this car was doing. I did not recognize the car as a neighbor or anybody that I knew. The car pulled over and came to a stop just in front of my mailbox. Then the driver's window rolled down a little, and I saw somebody open up my mailbox and then put something inside of it. I couldn't really tell who the person was from where I was. I think it was a man, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyways, I didn't really know what this person was doing or what they had put in my mailbox. After that, they rolled their window back up and then they drove away. I went back outside, and after seeing that the car was out of my sight, I walked down to my mailbox. I opened it and I looked inside to see an unmarked envelope. I brought it inside. When I opened up the envelope, there were several Polaroid pictures in it. They were all pictures of me. The first were me working at Sears earlier that day when I was at the registers working as a cashier. I had not known that any of these photos were taken. They were taken at a distance too, so it was not obvious to me and I never noticed it. There was then a photo of me walking in the store, I think when I went on my break. And the last photo was of me walking out to my car in the parking lot after work. This was clearly taken from inside of a car that was also in the parking lot. I hadn't noticed any of them. Of course, I was very freaked out by this. I didn't know what to do about it or anything. I didn't go to the police or report it, but I did tell my friends as well as coworkers. They were all just as confused as I was. The rest of my time working at Sears, I didn't notice anything else like that, and I never saw that car at my house again. I'm not sure where the pictures are. I think I still have them somewhere, but I couldn't find them. It's been so long. But I'd still like to know why that person did that. Was it just an elaborate prank? Why would they choose me though? And they must have followed me home without me noticing. It's all very strange. This happened when I was about 10 or 11, camping with my mom near a river in the woods. It was just the two of us out there, no one else around. The nearest farmhouse was a couple of miles away, but we were mostly alone. We had the tent set up and a small campfire going when a little before dark, this man arrived to our site. The area we were in was open to anyone wanting to camp, so it wasn't strange to see somebody else, but he had no gear with him at all. He made conversation with us and eventually came around to warning us that there were wild dogs in the area that we needed to watch out for. My mom and I were slightly uncomfortable because he didn't leave and said that he would stay at the campsite a while to protect us from the wild dogs. My mom hinted several times that we would be fine and that he was free to leave because we didn't need his protection. But he didn't leave. He stayed a long time, but there wasn't much we could do because it was a public campsite. He had the right to be there if he wanted, even though he had no camping stuff with him. Eventually, my mom told the man that we were going into our tent for the night, thanked him for keeping us company, and said that he could leave and we would be fine. I asked my mom quietly if he was going to hurt us, and she said of course not, but I could tell by the way her voice cracked that she was scared too. We didn't want to provoke him, but we didn't want to make him feel like we were scared either. So we just crawled into our tent while the man kept sitting on a log at the fire pit. I don't think my mom slept that night, as she had a knife close to where she lay in the tent. I watched the man through the flap in the tent for a while. At one point, while sitting by the fire, he pulled out a long knife and started sharpening it on a stick. He just stared down at the blade and ran it along the stick, making these slow scraping sounds. I asked my mom if he was going to kill us, and she kept saying no, but I could tell that she was worried. She tried not to show it, but she was prepared for the worst. I eventually fell asleep, but woke up a lot to see my mom was still awake, lying there and listening to the scraping sound of the knife on the stick. By morning, the guy was gone. I wasn't sure how long he had stayed or when he left. After packing up our gear, we stopped by the nearest farmhouse to tell somebody about the strange man. At the farmhouse, the old man there listened to our story, then kind of chuckled and said, "Oh, that's just Ivan. He means well, just doesn't know how to mind his own business." Apparently, he lived on a farm nearby, and the old man promised us that he'd have another word with his neighbor, reminding him not to be so rude and strange. A few years later, after our camping trip where we had met Ivan, I saw something disturbing. I was watching the news, and a man had been arrested who was a suspect in several missing person cases. They showed his photo on TV, and even though it had been a few years ago, I instantly noticed it was the guy who had been with us at the campsite. His name was Ivan Milat, a serial killer who had been picking up hitchhikers along the highways and killing them, and burying their bodies in the woods right across the river from where we had camped. I can't even describe the way I felt when I realized it. The guy who had been lurking outside our tent, sharpening a knife, talking about wild dogs, had been a serial killer. We had come so close to him, and I had no idea at the time. I don't think I'll ever forget that night and how lucky we were, but it still haunts me. I don't go on Facebook that much, but I do go on from time to time, and last year something really strange happened. One day I went on Facebook for the first time in probably a couple of weeks. When I did, I saw that I had one new friend request and clicked on it to see who it was. The person appeared to have the same exact profile as me. They had the same name as me and the same profile picture. It was like they were pretending to be me. I clicked on the profile, assuming it to probably be a bot, but this was really strange. There was not a whole lot that I could see right away on the page, so I accepted the friend request to see more. After I did, I saw that this person pretending to be me had posted several of the same pictures that I had on my page, but this profile only had one friend, which was now me. I was still thinking that it was a bot of some sort, and this was really weird. I sent a message to the person saying, "What's the meaning of this?" They responded back rather quickly, saying exactly what I had said to them. "What's the meaning of this?" I asked who it was, and they wrote back the same thing, just imitating what I said. It was really weird. I figured at this point that it was probably some kind of a prank. I got off of Facebook and texted a few of my friends about it. However, when I did, none of my friends admitted to it and didn't seem to know what was going on. I know my friends pretty well, and they all seemed genuinely confused. The next day, I was really curious as to who it was, So I went back on and sent another message to the page. This time, hoping that it was a joke somebody was playing on me for some reason, I said, "This is a funny joke, but seriously, who are you?" The page responded just saying, "This is not a joke." They finally said something other than just what I had said to them. I asked them to stop pretending to be me, saying that it was really weird. They responded saying, "Okay, I will just take your account then." I didn't know what they meant by this, but I was annoyed and I blocked the page right then and there. I thought that was that. The next day, however, I got a Facebook notification randomly saying that several people had liked my photo. I hadn't posted anything lately, so I went on to see. That's when I realized that my account had been hacked. There was a picture posted to my account. It was my profile picture, but put through several filters and it looked really weird. Whoever was behind this said they would hack my account, and they did. I really couldn't believe it. I quickly deleted the post and then changed my password. I hadn't told my previous password to anyone, so I don't know how they would have even known it. After that, I didn't go on Facebook for a long time, and also strangely, the person never hacked into my account again or sent me another friend request or message. I still don't know who did that or why. It's very mysterious. The house my husband and I have lived in for a while now has an Airbnb next door as neighbors. It has been operating for close to a year now as an Airbnb. My husband and I often noticed the guests coming and going. Most of them would stay to themselves, and a few would talk to us, but they were all nice people. However, one night in late September, we encountered some creepy guests who were staying at the Airbnb. It was a warm evening, and we were settling down to watch a movie when I noticed movement outside. I glanced out the window and saw a younger-looking couple in the Airbnb's backyard. They seemed to be setting up something odd with candles and laying other things down on the ground. I showed my husband, and we both agreed that it was strange. Our best guess was they were setting up some sort of ritual. However weird it was, everyone has their own unique hobbies, and who were we to judge what they wanted to do with their time at the Airbnb? We watched them for a while, unable to tear our eyes away. Firstly, it was just fun to watch, but also, we wanted to make sure that nothing extremely creepy was going on. They took a while to set up, so eventually we got bored and went back to watching our movie. Before going to bed, I checked out the window to see if the young couple was still out there. They still appeared to be just hanging out with whatever stuff they had set up, so I dismissed it and went to bed. In the middle of the night, I was gradually awoken by sounds coming through our bedroom window that was open for air. I could hear soft murmurs outside, low and rhythmic. I glanced at the clock, which showed that it was past 2 a.m. now. I woke up my husband, and we went to check out why the neighbors were still up at this time. We got out of bed and made our way to the back of the house and looked out the back window towards the backyards. Surprisingly, this time the young couple was in our backyard, standing and making strange movements in the flickering candlelight. It appeared they were doing whatever ritual thing they had set up earlier. What was even stranger was there were some lights in the woods, which were way out on the property away from our house. I guess the couple had set up some candles way out in the woods as well, but I wasn't sure. It didn't make sense. Somehow, it felt scarier to go outside and confront the couple about being on our property, rather than just let them continue what they were doing. We double-checked the house, locking all our doors and windows just in case before going back to bed. The next morning when we woke up, we cautiously walked into our backyard, checking to see if anything was damaged. It looked like the couple from the Airbnb had already left, since their car was gone. Everything was normal in our backyard, thankfully, besides a note that we found in the middle of the lawn pinned down by a rock. I bent down and picked up the small piece of paper and unfolded it to read it. It read, "Thank you for your participation. You have been blessed. Nothing major happened to us in our yard that night, but it was just really creepy in general. We left a message with the owner of the Airbnb, recommending not to let that young couple stay in again in the future if they tried to." A few years ago, I stayed at an Airbnb for the first and last time in my life. A small group of friends and I were on vacation, and we found an Airbnb for cheap, which still looked nice. It was nice because we didn't need to have any interaction with the host, since it was just a lockbox on the door with the key. The host had texted us the combination to get the key from the box, and we were able to let ourselves inside. Once inside, we got settled in and started making dinner. The house was pretty nice, just like we thought. What was strange though, as we explored the rooms, we noticed there were a lot of valuables just sitting out. For example, one of the rooms had a PS4 plugged in, and in a drawer in another room, there was some car and house insurance things, as well as some cash in a wallet. We thought it was strange how trusting the host was of random people staying in his place not to steal anything. We weren't planning on taking anything, but I'm sure there's some people who wouldn't think twice about it. Anyways, later that night after eating, we checked out the rest of the place, picked our bedrooms upstairs, and eventually checked out the basement. As we explored the large basement, we came across a door that was locked. The door being locked itself wasn't anything strange, but the fact that many valuables were left laying around in the house made us think, if none of the valuables were behind the locked door, what would the door need to be locked for, and what was behind it? Anyway, we continued with the rest of the night and went to bed at a good time since we had to be up early the next day. In the middle of that night, while sleeping in my bedroom upstairs, I was woken up with the urge to pee. I tried to go back to sleep, but it was bad enough to keep me up and I had to go to the bathroom. As I got out of bed and approached the door, I heard some movement out in the hallway. It sounded like somebody was shuffling down the carpeted hallway. I opened up my door to continue towards the bathroom, expecting to see one of my friends awake also trying to use the bathroom. When I opened my door, however, I saw someone at the end of the hallway opening a different door and look inside. I immediately could tell that this was not one of my friends based on the shape of the figure. I flipped on the light switch for the entire upper hallway, which was thankfully right near me. I screamed loud enough to wake up all my other friends as I saw a man at the end turn towards me with a look of surprise on his face. I was worried that he was going to attack someone, but thankfully, he seemed more ashamed and upset at getting caught snooping around the house and looking into our rooms. Turns out, he was the host of the Airbnb we were staying at. He tried to explain what he was doing here in the middle of the night, saying he was looking for some tools that he had left behind and needed for the morning. It wasn't a very convincing argument. After more questioning of the guy, we also found out he had been living in the locked room in the basement the whole time we had been there, even though he said we had the whole place to ourselves. Needless to say, all my friends and I are very certain that this guy was a creep and had probably been doing this to guests for years. On the bright side, at least he wasn't violent or aggressive, because we realized how much worse the situation at night could have been. I'm not certain what legal consequences this guy was faced with, but he did lose his right to rent out places at least. A strange thing happened to me a couple of years ago. At the time, I lived in an apartment by myself. It was a one-bedroom, one-bathroom place, and I lived on the second floor of the building. Overall, the apartment was not the nicest, and it didn't have that many units in it either. I knew a few of my neighbors, but not all of them. One night, I was at home by myself, like usual. It was sometime at night, I really don't know exactly the time, but there was a knock on my door. I walked over and answered it, without giving it that much thought. A man was standing there. He was kind of short and had dark brown hair. The man told me that he was my neighbor from down the hallway, and he pointed a ways to the left. He asked me if he could come inside of my apartment to make a phone call. He said that his Wi-Fi was not working, and he didn't have any service on his phone at the time, so without the Wi-Fi, he couldn't make any calls. I was not comfortable with this. I told the man sorry but no. He said that he would be really fast, and I told him that I really couldn't help him. He kind of came across as a little bit sketchy to me for some reason. The man turned to walk away, and I closed my door. I was really curious afterwards. I had never seen the man before, and had seen most of the people who lived in the building because it wasn't all that big. I thought maybe the guy would knock on another person's door, and I quietly opened my door and looked around the corner to see him walking away. He walked all the way to the end of the hall, and then he went inside of the elevator. I was suspicious that he didn't even live here. At one point or another, I had seen just about everyone that lived on my floor. After the man left, I went to one of the windows in my place. I looked out of it and to the guest parking lot where the main doors open up to. Now, there are assigned parking spaces for all the residents, and those are under the building. There's a small guest parking lot with like 10 spaces out front. I saw the man leave the building and then walk to an older-looking car in the guest parking lot and drive away. He definitely didn't live here. So why would he lie to me and claim that he did? I didn't know, but the fact that he wanted me to let him inside of my apartment kind of creeps me out. He certainly made up the whole story about his Wi-Fi being down and him not having any cell phone service. I'm not sure how he got into the building in the first place, but most likely somebody else let him in when they were entering. After that night, I never saw him again. That pretty much confirmed to me that he didn't live there. I'm really glad that I didn't let him inside of my apartment. Something crazy happened when I was in high school. It was during my junior year and a few months into the semester. I'm a female and was 17 at the time. One day, like any other, I went to school and it was my 4th hour class. Sometime during the hour, I remember that an announcement suddenly came over the intercom. We were told that the school was being locked down. Our teacher did all the things she was supposed to and locked the door and turned the lights off. Nobody really knew what was going on though. We all knew that it was not a drill, and everybody seemed a little bit worried. We all had no idea why the lockdown was happening. We just stayed in the room and things were very quiet for a while. After probably close to an hour, the lockdown finally ended. We were told that we would have the normal amount of passing time in the hallways, and then our final class of the day would be shorter than usual. So when we finally got let out of class, everybody was talking to each other about the lockdown. I was on my way back to my locker to drop my books off and get the ones for my next class. But before I could get there, I was pulled into the principal's office. I just remember that I saw the vice principal come up to me and ask if I could go with him. He said that I was not in trouble, so I followed him and we went to the principal's office. Then him and the principal both had me sit down and they told me what was going on. I was told that the school had been in a lockdown because a suspicious man had been seen inside the school during the class period. They went on to say that he was seen near the lockers, but ran away when questioned. Unfortunately, he somehow left the school before the police got there and had escaped. The grounds were searched, and he was not on or near school property anymore. But when he was inside, he had opened one locker, which happened to be mine. He had brought a bolt cutter, which he had used to break open my locker. This obviously could have been used as a weapon as well, but the man unfortunately escaped with it. I was asked if I knew anybody who would do that or why, but I didn't know anyone. When they gave a basic description of the man to me, I had no idea who it was. I was really just as confused as anyone. I told them that I didn't know. After that, I looked through my locker and nothing appeared stolen. I didn't really have much in there except for my books for school. So after that, the school day resumed. My parents got called, and when the school day was over, nobody seemed to know why the guy would do that. However, later on, something else occurred. It was that very same night. I remember that I was in my bedroom, which was at the back of our house. I was on my bed, just on my phone. But when I glanced out of the window randomly, I happened to notice something. It looked like somebody was walking through the backyard. I got up and moved over to the window. When I got a closer look, sure enough, there was a man there. I did not know who he was, but I noticed that he was walking towards me. I quickly ducked down so that he wouldn't see me. I then moved away from the window and hoped that the man would not approach it. But moments later, I saw him appear right on the other side and look in. I quickly ran out of my bedroom and found my parents. I wasn't sure if the man had directly seen me or not. Most of the lights in my room were off, other than one small lamp. I told my parents what was going on, and they looked out of a different window to the backyard. Then they called the police. My dad kept an eye on the guy out the window. The rest of us went to the front of the house. The police were really quick to respond. Within probably 5 minutes, they were there. And when they got there, the man was still prowling around the backyard. After they entered the back, the man tried running away. He made it out of our backyard, but not much farther. He ended up being caught. And we soon found out that it was the same man who had been at the school earlier. I didn't know who he was, but somehow it appeared as though he was stalking me. The whole thing was really crazy. I'm just glad that the guy was caught. I don't know what would have happened. A couple of years ago, I bought a gaming computer on Facebook Marketplace. I've been wanting to buy one for a while, and I knew that they're typically very expensive. So that gave me the idea to go on Facebook Marketplace and look for a used one. After several days of looking, I found one that I wanted. I decided to reach out to the seller and ask a little more information about it. The seller was a guy named Jeremy. We went back and forth a little bit, and I decided that I wanted to buy it. It was a pretty good deal, so we agreed on a day that I would go over and get the computer. It also came with a monitor, keyboard, and mouse as well. So after I bought it, I took it home, set it up, and started using it. I was happy with my purchase, and I used the computer for the next week and a half. Then I got another message on Facebook from Jeremy. He said that he wanted his computer back. I was really confused when I saw this, because he had just sold it to me like a week before. He said that he changed his mind and wanted it back now. I didn't want to return it. I liked the computer, and I had already installed several games and other programs on it. I told Jeremy no, I wasn't going to return it. Then Jeremy said that he would give me a certain amount of money for it. The funny thing is that the amount he offered was less than I paid for the computer by a few $100s. I pointed that out, and he said that it was all he could afford to give. Now, when he originally said he wanted it back, I assumed that meant he would pay the full price. I said the answer was still no. I was really annoyed that this guy was trying to get the computer back, and even more annoyed that he wasn't offering the full price. If he didn't want to sell it, then he shouldn't have sold it. However, Jeremy was not happy that I refused to give the computer back. He then sent me a friend request on Facebook, and then started messaging me a bunch of times. I ignored him for a while, but after he kept sending me messages for like 3 days straight, I blocked him. I thought that was that. This situation was strange enough. But unfortunately, that was not the end of Jeremy. Probably about a week after I blocked Jeremy, he showed up to my house. I happened to be home alone and was in my bedroom, on the very gaming computer that I had bought from Jeremy. It was nighttime and about 8 p.m. and dark out. I heard a knocking coming from the front door. I got up and left my room and went over to the living room and then looked out of the window. Jeremy was there on the front step. I recognized him from when I bought the computer. How did he know where I lived? This was really strange. I watched him stand there and knock again on the front door. I was wondering what on earth he had planned. Did he think that by showing up at my house unannounced that would make me change my mind? I stayed in the living room and ignored his knocks. I was hoping that he would just go away, and most of the lights in my house were off, so maybe he would think that I wasn't home. But I watched Jeremy hang around the front step for several more minutes. I was kind of looking around, and I had to move back from the window so that he wouldn't see me. He came back and knocked again on the front door, this time louder. He also yelled, asking for me to come outside. I still ignored him. I walked back to my bedroom, hoping that Jeremy would eventually give up and leave. When I got back to my room, I put in some headphones and sat back down at my computer. For the next 5 minutes or so, everything was fine. But suddenly, I heard a knocking sound. I took out my headphones and looked to the direction of my window. Jeremy was standing there, looking into my bedroom. I got up and ran over to the window and closed the blinds. Jeremy started yelling at me, but I couldn't really hear what he said very well. I left my bedroom and went back towards the living room. By that time, Jeremy had made his way back towards my front door. Then he started banging on it again. I went over to the door and shouted to him that I was going to call the police. Jeremy yelled at me to give the computer back. Then I called the cops. I told them what was going on, and Jeremy still wasn't leaving, and he continued to stay there, even after I got off the phone with the police. But unfortunately, he finally left just moments before the cops got there. I talked to them, gave them a description of Jeremy, and told them my side of the story. After that, the police left and said to call back if Jeremy ever returned. I was afraid that he would, but luckily he didn't. I still have a hard time believing how crazy it was, and I can't believe that that actually happened.